has been targeted by Iran after the attack on Saturday, and we have seen a barrage of drones and missiles.
The silence is deafening. At 2:14 local time yesterday, a series of encrypted bursts moved between a nondescript villa in Muscat, Oman, and the temporary communications hub at Donald Trump's Florida estate. This wasn't a routine diplomatic check-in. It was the culmination of a secret Track 2 dialogue that has effectively frozen the most critical security alliance in the Western world. One death away from a regional firestorm, a single secret meeting in Oman between Trump's hand-picked envoys and Iranian proxies has just changed everything, leaving the strongest alliance in the Middle East in total chilling pieces. We are witnessing the total collapse of the U.S.-Israel security umbrella as we have known it for 7 decades. While the public is told that the relationship is ironclad, the data suggests a pivot toward a nuclear-ready Iran and the systematic abandonment of the Jewish state in favor of a grand bargain. This is the America First pivot in its most raw, transactional form. Donald Trump is no longer acting as the Zionists' best friend who moved the embassy to Jerusalem. He is operating as the art of the dealer, looking for a legacy-defining Persian pact to secure his place in history and stabilize global markets. Today, I will reveal the Option 9 protocol, a secret memo where the U.S. State Department recently outlined exactly why Israel is now being recalibrated from a strategic asset to a strategic liability in the newly proposed regional energy corridor. The crisis began in the quiet corridors of Muscat. While the world's media was focused on domestic trial updates and tariff threats, Trump's personal representatives, led by figures like Steve Witkoff and supported by the tactical silence of Jared Kushner, were engaged in a secret summit. These back-channel talks involved direct contact with high-ranking Iranian officials, skipping the usual intermediaries and, more importantly, skipping the Israeli Ministry of Defense entirely. This marks a radical departure in transitional diplomacy. Trump's underlying belief is that he can fix the Middle East by bypassing traditional allies whom he now views as expensive dependencies that hinder his broader economic goals. The friction point occurred during what insiders are calling the Netanyahu vanished moment. For exactly 38 minutes during the height of the Oman negotiations, the Israeli Prime Minister was reportedly unable to reach the White House or the State Department. Calls were placed, secure lines were activated, but the response from Washington was a cold dial tone. This isn't just a diplomatic snub. It's a structural removal of Israel from the decision-making table by a man who once called himself their greatest protector.
As the war has had, we've verified footage of several health facilities damaged. This was Tehran's private Gandhi hospital, which had an oncology department and an IVF clinic, hit on March the 1st. At the Khatam al-Anbiya hospital the same day, panic after a nearby explosion.
To understand why this is happening, we have to follow the money, because in the world of Donald Trump, loyalty is often a line item on a balance sheet. The America First isolationism currently driving U.S. policy has necessitated a stabilized Iran to keep global oil prices at or below $60 a barrel. Trump's obsession with domestic inflation and the 2026 midterm cycle means he cannot afford a spike in. While the Pentagon's intelligence wing knows this guarantee is a ghost, a mere paper promise, it is a huge win that Trump can sell to his base as the ultimate peace deal. The statistical hammer that forced this hand was a sudden 3.1% drop in the U.S. dollar's strength against a basket of currencies earlier this quarter, coupled with rising shipping insurance rates in the Strait of Hormuz. Trump didn't leave Israel because he changed his mind about the ideology of the state. He did it because the math of the U.S. dollar demanded a sacrifice he was willing to make. By unfreezing assets and dangling the carrot of $78 billion in total sanctions relief, the administration is betting that a wealthy Iran is a quiet Iran. It is a gamble of historic proportions. While the economists in Washington celebrate a potential Goldilocks energy market, the men with the missiles in Tel Aviv are scrambling to rewrite their entire national defense doctrine. This shift has triggered a quiet but ferocious civil war within the U.S. national security apparatus. A dissent cable has recently circulated through the halls of the Pentagon, signed by 38 high-ranking military officials, including retired four-star generals and active-duty tactical commanders. Their warning is blunt. Trump's sidelining of Israel creates a power vacuum that Iran and its proxies are already filling with advanced drone technology and ballistic precision. The clash between Trump and the Pentagon is reaching a fever pitch. Trump has reportedly dismissed these concerns, labeling the dissenters as the losers who got us into forever wars and bureaucrats who love spending American tax dollars on foreign sand. However, the reality of the tripwire protocol cannot be ignored. For the first time in decades, the U.S. has quietly slowed the delivery of bunker-buster munitions, specifically the GBU-57. The logic provided to Congress was inventory management, but the reality is a deliberate move to avoid upsetting the deal currently being hammered out in Muscat and Geneva. There is a concept in military strategy called planned abandonment. Trump calls it the art of the deal. The generals call it a catastrophe that invites a preemptive strike. Now, we have to talk about your money, because this betrayal just hit the global supply chain tripwire, and your bank account is next. If we project this trajectory to its logical conclusion, we find ourselves in a worst-case scenario simulation that is currently being wargamed in underground bunkers. With the U.S. security umbrella folded, Iran no longer feels the pressure of maximum restraint. They activate the Hezbollah corridor. In this scenario, we aren't looking at a proxy war of attrition. We are looking at a direct saturation strike on the port of Haifa and the Mediterranean gas rigs. Netanyahu, faced with a Trump administration that won't pick up the phone, is forced to initiate Option 9. This is the Israeli protocol for a solo, desperate nuclear conventional hybrid strike on the Natanz and Fordow enrichment facilities. The betrayal loop then completes its circuit. Trump's immediate reaction on social media wouldn't be to defend the ally, but to blame
has
Israel
been targeted by Iran after the attack on Saturday, and we have seen barrage of drones and missiles.
And reality where the first 24 hours of a regional war involved the U.S. Sixth Fleet withdrawing to international waters to maintain a neutral stance while the Levant burns. The moment the first Iranian missile hits, the special relationship isn't just dead, it's being buried by the man who promised to make it great again. Satellite imagery would show the sudden darkened windows of the U.S. Embassy as staff are evacuated, not to assist Israel, but to distance the U.S. from the fallout of a war it no longer wants to fund. The geopolitical betrayal of an ally like Israel doesn't stay in the Middle East. It travels across the Atlantic and lands directly on your front door. If Trump's gamble fails and Israel is forced to go solo, the energy tsunami will be unlike anything we've seen. Oil won't stay at $60. It will hit $220 as the Persian Gulf becomes a literal no-go zone for tankers. Your gas prices, your heating, and your grocery bills will triple overnight. Furthermore, the end of the U.S.-Israel tech and intelligence sharing agreement means Western cities lose their most effective early warning system for global terror networks. The final verdict on Trump is that he gambled on a legacy of peace, but may have triggered a decade of chaos. Was it a betrayal or a necessary pivot to save the American economy from the weight of foreign entanglements? You might not live in Tel Aviv, but when the America First policy leaves a primary ally in the dark, the darkness eventually finds its way to your thermostat and your retirement fund. The petrodollar stability is the next domino to fall when the U.S. signals that its protection is no longer for sale to its oldest friends. Publicly, the State Department issued a brief statement late last night, claiming that coordination with our regional partners remains robust and ongoing. However, the reality on the ground tells a very different story. Financial flows tracked by independent monitors show a sudden cessation of specific military aid tranches that were earmarked for Israeli missile defense. While the White House press secretary insists that the president stands with Israel, the flight tracking data of U.S. government Gulfstreams shows frequent, unannounced stops in neutral capitals where Iranian diplomats are known to come. The official readout from the latest call between Trump and Netanyahu was described as productive, but sources close to the Prime Minister's office described it as a shouting match, where the president threatened to pull all U.S. support if Israel interfered with the Muscat talks. We are seeing a massive gap between the rhetoric of ironclad support and the tactical reality of strategic distancing. If you look at the market data from the last 72 hours, the evidence of this shift is undeniable. Short positions on Israeli defense contractors have surged, while specific energy futures tied to Iranian output have seen a curious stabilization despite the war talk. Satellite imagery over the Negev desert shows a high state of alert at Israeli airbases, yet the corresponding U.S. satellite pings show a reduction in data sharing frequency. Intelligence sources reveal that the red line data link between the Pentagon and the IDF has been throttled to level 3 access, meaning Israel is no longer getting real-time feeds from U.S. assets over Iran. This isn't a technical glitch, it's a policy choice. Furthermore, the 3.1% dollar drop mentioned earlier has stabilized only because of a silent agreement regarding oil flow guarantees that only Iran can provide in the current landscape. The perspectives on this are as polarized as the region itself. In Tehran, the mood is one of cautious triumph. Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi has hinted that a new era of American realism has arrived, suggesting that the U.S. finally recognizes the futility of its previous maximum pressure campaign. Meanwhile, in Jerusalem, the sentiment is one of profound betrayal. Members of the Knesset have openly called for Israel to pivot to the east, seeking closer security ties with India itself. The MAGA base remains largely supportive of the president's "no more wars" stance, viewing the sidelining of Israel as a necessary step toward bringing troops home. However, the traditional hawk wing of the Republican Party is in a state of quiet mutiny, fearing that Trump is repeating the Obama mistakes, but with a more volatile, transactional twist. The broader implications of this America First pivot are staggering. We are looking at the potential end of the post-World War II security architecture in the Middle East. If the U.S. can sideline Israel for a better price on oil, then no ally, from Taipei to Tallinn, is safe from a sudden renegotiation of their security status. This creates a global loyalty deficit. Economically, it marks the transition from a security-first global market to a transaction-first market. While this might lower costs in the short term,
has been targeted by Iran after the attack on Saturday, and we have seen a barrage of drones and missiles and
the entire system. The petrodollar, which relies on the U.S. being the ultimate guarantor of Middle Eastern stability, is now on a shaky foundation. If the U.S. is no longer the policeman of the Gulf, the world will find a new currency to trade the world's most vital resource. For the average person watching this from the U.S., Europe, or elsewhere, the Israel Sidelined headline feels distant until you look at the supply chain. Israel is a global hub for high-end cybersecurity, medical technology, and semiconductor design. A solo war that devours Israeli resources or targets its infrastructure means a global, early warning blackout. Beyond that, the energy tsunami is the most immediate threat. When the special relationship fails, the energy insurance that has kept the West running for decades fails with it. You will see it in the supply chain surcharge on your Amazon order. The end of this alliance isn't just a map change, it's a lifestyle change. The America First policy promised to put more money in your pocket, but the cost of abandoning a primary ally may end up being the most expensive deal in history. As we look forward, there are three realistic scenarios. The first is a grand bargain success, where Trump actually secures a nuclear-free Iran and Israel is forced to accept a new, albeit uncomfortable, status quo. This is the Trumpian miracle scenario. The second is the preemptive strike scenario, where Israel, feeling totally abandoned, launches a massive strike on Iran, forcing a reluctant U.S. back into a war it tried to avoid, but on much worse terms. The third is the regional realignment, where Israel and the Sunni Arab states form a formal defense pact that completely excludes the United States, effectively ending American influence in the region for a generation. Each of these paths carries massive risks for global stability. The tripwire has been pulled, and the next few weeks will determine if this was a masterstroke of diplomacy or the greatest strategic blunder of the 21st century. We are watching the signals very closely, from the gold markers to the troop movements in the Galilee. How is this story being covered where you live right now? Do you see it as a necessary pivot for the American economy, or a dangerous betrayal of a core ally? Which of the three scenarios I just outlined do you consider most likely, and why? We'll continue tracking this situation as the transcripts from Muscat and Mar-a-Lago continue to leak. Subscribe to stay ahead of the blackout. It's the only way to protect what's yours when the signal goes dead. The lights are flickering in Jerusalem, but the darkness is heading for the west. Where will you be when the signal goes dead? We'll continue tracking this situation. See you in the next